All right, and welcome everybody to the special Halloween edition of a PatternFly community meeting. Glad to have you all here with us. Got a pretty jam-packed schedule, so fingers crossed that we can get through all of it in good time. All right. So just a quick outline of the agenda. We've got various updates from me, from content, from extensions, from the Core and React teams, and then a quick run through of some of the future plans for PatternFly. So the first thing to call out is that we have some new staging sites. So if you have bookmarks to our old staging sites so that you could see what we had deployed most recently on our main branches in the core, React, and extension repos, you will need to update your bookmarks, and I have the new links for those in the slide. There was some last minute changes to where this slide deck was being hosted, so I'll have to move this around so that it's accessible to everybody, but I will be sending this out, a link to the slide deck out in a follow-up email after this meeting. And now on to Erin with some content updates.
Hello. Just wanted to give a variety of updates on what has been going on in the content world for PatternFly's website. Wanted to talk about like a few of the things that I've done over the past quarter, the major things, and then also kind of touch on some of the things that are coming soon over the next quarter. So one of the major things that I've been doing in terms of content for patternfly.org is a content audit and inventory, in which I'm just kind of moving through every bit of documentation on the website, taking an inventory of what's there, when it's been updated, what needs to be updated, and going through and making those updates as I can. It's quite a big project, so I envision this to kind of be an ongoing thing to make sure that we're as up to date as possible across the website. But over the past quarter, I've worked to update the design foundations. So those are all up to date now on the website, and also the UX writing guidelines. And so those updates are somewhat just for consistency and clarity, and then sometimes it's also updating the guidance itself. So if you haven't taken a look at those, if you have questions, do so. I've been kind of moving through the content audit, starting with those higher level guidelines. So the next step there is to update our accessibility guidelines at that higher level. And that's in progress now, and I expect to be updated with our next release. And another project that I've been working on is kind of was related to the content audit. We knew that our layouts didn't really have built out design guidelines, and that became more apparent as I did the audit. So focused on that over the past quarter, and now there are design guidelines for our layouts. Before there was pretty much nothing. Now it's they're still pretty brief, but we hope that they kind of answer the questions that people may have when they're trying to use our layouts. And then the last couple of points here are also things that you can expect to see soon. We've conducted some user research on some of the onboarding content for the PatternFly website. So that includes some of our getting started documents, as well as some of our component documentation. And we're still working on finalizing the analysis of those results, but those will be, hopefully those will be presented soon in a community meeting. And then I imagine that will dictate some of the content work that I add into my to-do list over the next couple of quarters. And then coming sooner than that, I hope, is the deprecated component migration guides. So these will be guides for the components that were deprecated with the release of V5. So things like table and select, to name a couple. And we're hoping that that guidance will provide a little bit more specificity around how you can upgrade those components. That's about it for me.
All right, thank you, Erin. Definitely looking forward to a lot of that, but especially those deprecated component migration guides. All right, next up, over to Jesse with some extensions updates.
So I wanted to make everyone aware that recently we were made aware of a security vulnerability with the Showdown package, which was being used as a dependency in Quick Starts. Thankfully, it wasn't a critical vulnerability, but it was still a high vulnerability, so we wanted to take action right away. Essentially, the package showdown has an old yards parser dependency with a high security vulnerability. So we removed the showdown dependency in both v4 and v5, and then updated the peer dependency to 2.1.0 or greater to mitigate that issue. But I wanted to let everyone know, if you're still on PatternFly 4, use version 2.4.3, and then if you're on PatternFly 5, make sure to use version 5.1.0. So that's all on that specific point. I just really wanted to make sure that everyone knew about this and had an opportunity to update. And then on the next slide, if you could, Austin. I just wanted to give it a quick introduction before Don talks about component groups. As some of you probably already know, PatternFly extensions are common experiences that are shared by one or more Red Hat products. And so something that the PatternFly team works hard at is finding these product problems and then trying to solve them. And one of those opportunities was with HCC and their front-end components package. So some background is that HCC manages the front-end components package, which is a shared, commonly used, and PatternFly-based UI components. However, it was also an aging, stale, and out-of-date UI package that was used by many front-end code bases. So an extension was created with the collaboration between HCC and the PatternFly devs to centralize these commonly used components, simplify the maintenance, and improve discovery. So now Don is going to show off that new extension and show you a little of what's coming. Don, could you take it away?
Yeah. Do you want me to take the screen? I guess I can do that. All right, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm good. All right, so as Jesse was saying, these are some common components that are coming over from HCC. Some of these were in the front end component library, but that's going away, and this is going to end up replacing it. So the things that we have so far for the first release is an Ansible. It's basically, it indicates whether or not Ansible is available or not. If it's supported or unsupported, it'll give you two different logos. We have a way of checking severity of things by using a battery. For default, there's no severities or nothing's going on. You just get a fully charged battery. And if you have low severity, you get a green mark in the battery. For medium, you get the 2 orange marks. And for high, you get in between orange and red, 3, and then criticals all red. So they can be used for monitoring severities and using them to provide information to users. Other things we have is, this one's still in beta. It's the details page. It allows you to have like a primary action button, action with edit resources, delete resources, and it sets up some tabs for you, so you can use this to put detailed information in. You could have 1 tab, you'd have 2 tabs. It's really up to you how you want to do it. The next one is error boundary. This is used in case you get an error on the screen, like a console error or a network error, and something pops up on your screen and you don't want to show it. This will catch it, and it'll show the details in this little box instead of it showing all over your screen. So this is a fake error. They just threw it out after like a few minutes. So that takes care of that one. Error states the next one. This basically tells you the type of error you have, and gives you a page where you can tell give the user the type of error that they have, and some information on how to solve it if you have that, or what exactly it means. And then we have an invalid page. So this is if you go to a page and you can't find it, you can throw this one up instead. Not authorized. So if the user doesn't have permissions to access a certain page but tries to go there, this is a recommended pattern that they'll be using to display this information. Skeleton table. What's this used for is to show, as things are being loaded, you can just have these bars, these skeletons that go back and forth. Once things are loaded, I'll show you on this one. They'll pop up. If I relaunch it again, it does the same thing. So that's one way to indicate that the table is still being loaded. We have tag count. basically gives you the number of tags you have. If you don't have any tags, it's just blank. Unavailable content. For some reason, like a page is unavailable, like that page is down for who knows, but for some reason, you can give them a status page to go to, and you can provide them with what information you have about that page. Warning modal. This is just a modal that pops up and gives you a warning. It's just following the specific pattern that was first created in the front end components and then moved over to here in the component groups. And that's it for the first release. We have a meeting to see with some other teams to see what else we can bring in. And we'll keep an eye out to see where else we can find common patterns to put together in component groups so everybody doesn't have to keep writing the same thing over and over again. Any questions?
All right, seems like no questions, so gonna pick things back up on my end. Also, Don, you say that's it for the first release, like you didn't just run through a dozen different components. All right. So next topics are going to be running through the different items that are new in our Q3 release that came out at right about the beginning of the month. I don't remember specifically when, but around the beginning of the month. I'm going to start with just pointing everyone to the release notes. The first core and React links that I have there are going directly to the full changelog that goes through every commit pretty much that went into the release in those repos. The highlights page runs through just a couple big ticket items and some information about them in more detail. And the image there is showing the package versions because for the most part, we've aligned on versions, but it's not quite 100% yet. And next, I'm going to go over to Coker for a kind of run through of the right to left support demonstration. Do you want to take the screen over?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
I'll show folks this demo, which is pretty cool. Just a sec, we'll figure that out. I think it's this one. Yeah, cool. So I'll start here. We have a page on the website called Right to Left Handbook. Find it down here under Dev Resources. It's a TLDR of how right to left support was built into PatternFly. My TLDR would be that this is all baked into PatternFly. There's no sort of opt-in or anything like that. You just get the vast majority of it for free without having to do anything. It just has to do with the way that we reconfigured styling of components and layouts and all of that to respond to an indication in your document, like your HTML, that would say, hey, I've got a right to left language as opposed to a left to right language. And the styling then takes care of things like directions, top and bottom. Well, top and bottom don't apply to left to right and right to left, but spacing for left things and on right things and borders and all that kind of stuff just swaps logically based off of the document's language. So the majority of it you get for free. Browsers and CSS have come a really long way in being able to implement that kind of thing just out of the box, which is really cool. So we've told basically everything that was left to not be left, instead just be the start of whatever this box is. If there's a border on the left, put it at the border start, and start translates to either left in a left to right language or right in a right to left language. And there's that kind of support for the majority of things. There are a few little caveats that don't work as we would as you'd like for them to. Imagine that kind of support's coming, but for the most part, we've gotten everything implemented. So the real exception here is probably just going to be with icons. When you swap direction, the language direction in your document, there are some things that the browser just doesn't know what to do with. So if you have an icon that implies a direction of some sort, there may be a case where that icon needs to change its orientation, basically like flip it or use a different icon, or maybe use a more universal icon. That's probably ideal to indicate whatever the icon is indicating, one that works in both right to left and left to right. I'll show a couple of examples of that. And specifically for icons, I will call out this RTL helpers section. We have a couple of class names and a prop on our icon component that'll allow you to be able to flip something in right to left. So when the document says, hey, I'm in a right to left mode, you can pass a should mirror RTL prop to the icon React component, and in right to left mode, the icon will flip horizontally, so it just mirrors itself. And then we also have a CSS class for that can be applied to anything, by the way, not just icons, for some other type of thing you got going on. And then down here we have some best practices and resources. So the non-TLDR of what is right to left support, what does it look like, how do I do it, what kind of icons should change directions, things like that. Really good call outs. Material has a really great article right here on which elements should be reversed in RTL layout. I think it's interesting even if you aren't planning on implementing it anytime soon. So that said, let me show you a demo. This is just a demo. It's not on the website at the moment, but we do plan on publishing this to the website. So this will be publicly accessible relatively shortly. So this is just a basic boilerplate layout that a PatternFly application may have. So you got some nav and table with some icons and text and URLs over here. These URLs in the last column are truncated at the beginning of the URL because the beginning of the URL is the same for every one of them. It's https whatever.com something. The end of the URL is what you really care about. And so I have this button here that says switch to Hebrew. Just installed a little translation system for the content that's on the page, translated the text, and then let PatternFly do the rest of the magic. So pretty much everything just flipped for me automatically, which is really cool. The handful of things that don't do that automatically have some helpers in. So like the URL truncation bit, that didn't work as expected. That took a little bit of work. But basically I just used our truncate component and told it to truncate it a particular direction based off of whether you're an RTL or not. These labels, this is kind of an example of why you might want to read that material icon and what things should switch directions. So for example, clocks always run clockwise regardless of your language. And so the clock icon does not mirror itself. It doesn't go in the opposite direction. This walking icon, which is, it's for running. We didn't have a running icon. So walking, I'll pretend the little character is running. That does change direction. I saw an example of that in the material article, which is great, good for them. So that fellow does change, and that's just using the should mirror RTL prop on the icon component. This hand icon for stopped, that's a universal icon for stop in multiple languages. Technically, I think I could have used a stop sign too. I think there was an octagon. Yeah, I have to think of the shape, but you know, stop sign. could have worked as well, because stop signs, at least relative to the language that I'm using here, Hebrew, in Hebrew-speaking countries, a stop sign actually looks like a U.S. stop sign or an American stop sign. So anyways, our pagination component was another small call out here. For the most part, it was pretty much just translations across the board, but the pagination component has words built into it, like numbers of number items. That's not something that's user supplied. The PatternFly component supplies it. However, we do provide props to change that language, change the terms used. And so I just passed variable values to those props based off of the language that I'm using. So that was an instance where one of our components is super smart in being able to anticipate that you might want to do something like this. So I think that concludes the demo. Again, this will be published on the website soon, so folks can check it out. Highly encourage looking into this. And I mean, this is all just in an effort to support internationalization in applications. And when things change to a different language, hopefully the UI doesn't look as bad as it would have before. So that's it. If you have any questions, you try it out and something's not working like you'd like, feel free to reach out to us on Slack. We're all semi-experts in this now. It's been a real cool group effort. And yeah, good luck. Thanks.
All right, thank you for that awesome demo. I think I can very, very confidently say that this is something that we're super excited for people to start using, taking advantage of. All right. Next on the agenda is updates from the React team. First is going to be from me, though the work to enable this actually came from one of our interns, Dominic. So shout out to Dominic. I was going to take over the screen share, but actually this image pretty much goes over what it is. It's the ability for our labels to be clickable and work more or less as buttons. It's a feature that's been, I think, requested a few times, and one that, thanks to Dominic, now exists. So love to see that. Next, gonna go over to Eric to run through a couple things. Eric, do you want to take the screen share over?
Yeah, I can take that. Let's see, entire screen. And hopefully it's showing up for everyone. Okay, so the first update has to do with our drawer component. Before I get into the actual update, I just really quickly want to show the current focus management with the component. So right here, I'm looking at our basic example for the drawer. And I'm going to be using the keyboard only to do this because it is more evident with that. So when I tab and focus the toggle drawer button here in the example, if I hit space to open the drawer panel, you can see that Happy Halloween text receives focus because it has a tab index of 0. When I tab, goes to the close icon. I tab again, it goes to this another action button that I added in. Some potential downsides with this is you can't hit escape. If I hit escape, it doesn't close. It doesn't automatically close out the panel. Another issue is that now I'm on this last focusable element in the drawer, or in the drawer panel. If I hit tab again, now it focuses outside that panel, but it's still open. So it's still open, and I'm tabbing through. I may not know that's still open. Now the possible downside is that in order to get all that working, we have to pass in an onExpand prop. And in this example, we are also defining a drawer ref. So we have to pass in a ref and onExpand to do all that. With the latest update, scroll all the way down. There we go. We've added a focus strap to the drawer. And again, you have a bit of an explanation here in the example, but basically I tab to a link first, Now I tab to the toggle drawer with focus trap button. Now if I hit space, you see some spooky content, very Halloweenified examples here. And the close button automatically receives focus. If I tab again, the another action button receives focus. And now if I tab again, you might expect that TS toggle button to receive focus, but because of focus trap, it goes all the way back to the close button. So we're not able to leave unless we click outside that panel. And another bonus, I hit escape, closes the panel, and focus automatically goes back to that toggle button that previously had focus, which another downside is that isn't automatically there with the default on expand functionality in that basic example. And you can see, if I scroll down a bit, all we're doing here is we're passing in the focus trap prop with an object with the enabled property of true. That's all you need. If you want a little more customization, if you don't want that close button to receive focus first, if you want that another action button to receive focus, should still have copied. Yep. All you need to pass in is that element to focus on expand. And you can see here, all I'm doing is passing in basically a query selector for an ID. And this button has that text test click ID. So now if I go back and using keyboard again, if I open the drawer, the another action button now receives focus first instead of that close button. And that's basically it for that update. I'll just take a second to take a sip of water if anyone has any comments or questions. Otherwise, also after that, I'll just go into the timestamp one if you're good with that. Okie dokie. So our timestamp component, again, before going into the update. So previously with our timestamp component, the only instance of any sort of automated computation, like taking a date time and converting it to a UTC time, the only instance of automating that was with our default tooltip. You can see in this example, if we hover this time, which is by default, it's using my locale, so Eastern Standard Time, or might be using earlier time. But if we hover over it, you can see that the tooltip time is just UTC. And in the example, nothing fancy is being passed in, just the variant is default. And it's just doing all that under the hood. If you wanted to display this, always visible text as UTC, that would basically be a lift for you. So now what we can do, go back to our default example. All you need to do is pass in this should display UTC prop. And you can see here, this top timestamp is just kind of like the default time. This second timestamp has that should display UTC prop passed in. Both have the same, date time passed into it. Actually, they don't have any date time passed into it, so they're definitely using the same date time there. But you can see it displays the UTC time instead. And it also renders that UTC suffix automatically. And what is kind of great is that it also takes into account the time format you may want, which you can see here in our basic formats example. You can pass in, full, long, medium, or short for the time format and date format props. And basically for anything but full, so you can see here full has Eastern Daylight Time. If we pass in that should display UTC prop, you can see it's the full coordinated universal time. Anything but full will, and that's done automatically. So anything but full will automatically be UTC, just to ensure that users reading it will know this is UTC time, not, their locale time or any other sort of time zone. And that's just automatically done for you now. You don't have to compute UTC yourself or take anything you're passing in and do any sort of hocus pocus to get that. And that's about it for timestamp.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Though I do wonder if hocus pocus might actually be pretty relevant today. And now I think we're going to go over to Katie to talk about the addition of multiple toggle groups support to toolbar.
Hi. I was sharing before I unmuted, and it did not like me doing that and trying to unmute at the same time. So firstly, I'll go over what we currently have because this is not a breaking change. So if you only need the single toolbar toggle group, then you're good. Nothing changes for you. So currently you've got two methods for a single toggle group. You can either be component managed, where you just pass it the toggle group and it kind of does its own breakpoints. And if you expand and collapse, it does this automatically. The other method you've got for a single toggle group that still works is consumer managed toggle groups. This is when you pass the expanded and handler for the expanded state to the toolbar. So again, if you collapse this down, it does it kind of internally for you, but you manage the state from the outside as well as the breakpoint. Now, if you want multiple toggle groups, this changes slightly because toolbar was only built initially to support the single toggle group. So if I scroll up here to this temporary example, the major difference is that this expansion state now lives inside toolbar toggle group. So with this setup, you can have as many toggle groups as you want. You can pass in your own breakpoints that can be different. So I've got one that breakpoints on smaller versus larger. And there's a couple extra props for filters, but first let's just demonstrate. If you start collapsing down, then it collapses into the first one, whereas the risk is here. But if you keep collapsing down, then now you have two different toggle groups and they are separate. So when you click them, they're not going to combine into a single menu and they open individually. It also breaks out the two different filter groups for this as well for the chips. And if you pull it back up for a second, it will recollapse back. The only other kind of caveat for this multiple toggle groups currently is that you're going to need to pass a additional ref4 toolbar filter specifically to tell it where to render those chips when it's collapsed down into a toggle group. And there are some extra like props that you can pass for the filters specifically. That's really the only thing that all of these props are for, not the breakpoint, these four. And I think that's about it. Really, in the future, we'll probably internalize this expanded state. So there's going to be a component managed version of this too, maybe in our next breaking change release. But currently, because nothing's breaking and it still supports the single toggle group for the managed state, it's got a lot of conflicts for internal logic for that. So you'll have to deal with the state temporarily, at least, for multiple toggle groups only. And I think that's about it.
All right. Thank you, Katie. Screen share back over real quick. And the next item is that we are very happy to announce that the first load flicker that you would see sometimes on all of our popper-based elements, so things like drop-downs, menus, tooltips, popovers, all of those, that has now been fixed in the 5.1 and related series of releases. And now we're going to go over to Nicole for some updates on her findings in the ecosystem architecture space. Do you want to take the screen over, Nicole, or you want me to keep it?
I think you can keep it. When the slides get sent out after the meeting, I definitely encourage people to take a peek at the image here. It's a little hard to read on the screen share. And and it's based off of a Miro board that I think if you're at Red Hat, you'd be able to access the Miro board as well. I'll make sure all those links are available for whoever the audience is. But what this basically represents is sort of a visual diagram of all of the projects, all the code bases that the PatternFly team essentially owns. PatternFly team at Red Hat is pretty large for a UI dev team and design team. But collectively, if when we say PatternFly maintains, or the PatternFly team maintains PatternFly, it could mean a lot of things. This is what it means. Sorry, excuse me. So this diagram highlights sort of all of the NPM packages that are published and colloquially referred to as PatternFly React. That includes React Core, React Icons, our React Table package. Those are all individual packages that collectively compose PatternFly React. We also refer to extensions as a group of things often, but are also a suite of individual projects. So those are all listed at the bottom of this diagram. That includes things like topology and the React component groups that was demoed earlier. Those are all collectively part of our extensions suite of products or projects. And then there's a lot of more one-off projects that are all part of this umbrella as well, but pretty vital aspects of our ecosystem. Probably the most vital is colloquially, again, given the term core, so you hear us use that all the time. Our core code base is where all of the HTML and CSS code lives to implement PatternFly. So our PatternFly React and extensions implementations are built on top of that. And there are even a few community projects that are built on top of our core repo to implement PatternFly in other JavaScript frameworks. But the core repo publishes to NPM at PatternFly/PatternFly. So that's what we're referring to when you ever hear the PatternFly team talk about core. We have our website, which lives in our PatternFly org repo. But also in that repo is another package that we deliver called the documentation framework, which is used to help us generate our documentation. It builds out our workspaces, it builds out our website, and it's even being shared with a few product teams to help possibly even expand out their documentation, even if it's not quite PatternFly. Yeah, not. There are some docs built on top of the documentation framework not owned by PatternFly, I guess is what I'm saying. And there's the whole design side. So in terms of deliverables, I guess, that the design side of PatternFly team kind of owns, we do have a sketch library that was primarily used for developing PatternFly 4. And we also have some Figma libraries, one that's pretty much wrapped up development, I believe, for PatternFly 5. And future iterations of PatternFly are also being developed, or developing out Figma libraries. So that's part of what the PatternFly team owns. And there's a design tokens repo, which is still being built out. That's going to be heavily featured for the new look and feel coming to PatternFly in the future. But that's sort of a high level summary of a lot of the efforts owned by PatternFly. There also are a few, the gray tabs don't even necessarily have a home in this flow chart of diagram, but are all also separate projects that the PatternFly team maintains, owns, and has made available for people. So yeah, just hopefully what this does is paint a picture of how large the ecosystem really is for PatternFly, how many efforts the PatternFly team owns, but also kind of draw a line about like, maybe there are things you've heard of, community projects, things built on top of PatternFly owned by other groups, and the PatternFly team doesn't have as much jurisdiction over those areas if you don't see them on this map. So that's just for some clarity. If you have any questions, absolutely reach out to anyone on the PatternFly team. And when the slides go out and the links are shared, definitely click into it and see if everything you expected to see there is there. There you go.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Next, going to go over to Andrew to run through some of the future of PatternFly topics.
Sure, sounds good. All right, so we're just going to go through kind of the next 6 to 7, 8-ish months of PatternFly. So I guess, Austin, if you're driving, next slide, please. So I'm going to try and kind of lightning round through this. We are going to talk a little bit about the air traffic control effort that we're doing, where we're kind of changing the PatternFly team, and then the PatternFly 6 new and improved coming 2024. Next, please. All right, how we're changing PatternFly. I've kind of condensed all of these things. We did a presentation that had a lot of different slides talking, but I'll just kind of Cole's Notes version of this. So if you go to the next one, we are leveraging our internal analytics that is kind of custom built for PatternFly, but also our website kind of analytics as well. So we have good measurement on component usage across all the different product areas. There's a lot of really valuable information that we can pull. We're working very closely with extensions and working with the product teams. Kind of, you saw the React component group demo a minute ago that Don had shared. So we're pulling more product focused work that is reusable and can be shared more across the portfolio. Also, Aaron mentioned that we had a research effort done in this past quarter, and we are committed to doing probably one research effort at least per quarter using the user experience research team. So I think she mentioned we'll try and do a readout of that probably in the next community meeting. I think that's scheduled for, our internal one is scheduled for this week, so we'll have something to share with the team. And then lastly, the Red Hat portfolio, working with trying to align with the Red Hat engineering priorities and really trying to move PatternFly in the direction that is supporting those efforts. Really quick, I'm going to go through every single point, but this is just the flow of how our quarterly release planning is done. So the product owners, myself and Sarah, will meet with Nicole, who's our architect, but also the extensions lead, Jesse, and we'll kind of go through what we're hearing from product teams and try and make our priorities aligned to those use cases and experiences from those examples. And then we'll kind of map out the high level priorities and feature work. Then we'll work with the development leads in both Core and React on scheduling in bug fixes, tech debt, and those kind of features as well. So we'll try and scale all these things into one quarterly cycle, and then we'll do sprint planning based on the 3-week cycle as well. And then finally, we'll work with the individual contributors to take in those issues, and they also have opportunity to point out anything obvious or anything that we've missed. So this process will evolve a little bit. We actually just had a good face-to-face last week where we talked about this process and really refined it. So it will definitely help our process moving forward, working now with this quarterly schedule that we've just rolled out and have our first quarterly release already under our belt. All this is in the open, so if you have any questions about our roadmap, you can check it out on our GitHub project board. If you see anything on our quarterly release or our annual release, or all these roadmaps are fully exposed to anybody. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to us in any of these community meetings or office hours or any opportunity. You can certainly be in touch. And then we have a new update for PatternFly Mission Control, which is something that Austin has worked really hard on. So we're doing a lot of our own internal testing before it even reaches product teams, so that we can try and catch some failures and bugs before they get to you. So I'm just trying to make that migration path for any product team, be it in quarterly releases or annual version bumps. We can try and do all the heavy lifting up front for you, so it's an easier path. And Nicole just kind of mentioned this too, but working with the portfolio, she has a really good Miro board that is outlining all the products and where they stand with migrations. And we're trying to work with product teams on their path to V5 and eventually V6 and what that looks like for them. And every product has a little bit of a different use case, so it's an interesting problem to solve for sure. Sorry, my bangs are in the way. Here we go. All right, rounding the corner, V6. We are working very hard on this now. The design team is working very closely with Core. So if we want to jump to the next one, what V6 actually means, we started in V5 this kind of Penta design story, where we're trying to do a refresh of the entire PatternFly look and feel. So with the new visual change, it could be a big breaking change for products who have maybe a little bit of a different migration path where they may have to maintain different versions of PatternFly. So we would have basically what's called a classic theme, like classic Coke, where it still has the same look and feel in its own theming layer. And then when products are ready, just kind of flip the switch and all change to the new visual refresh, then we can kind of help them transition to that. The next slide, it's not just the look and feel. We are working very closely with the brand team. Sorry, they're still in the way. Oh, there we go, that's better. We're working with the brand team on aligning our color palettes and typography and all that good stuff. And then we're using a design token system and style dictionary so that both design and development are working from the same kind of framework. So if any changes are done in one, it will be reflected in the other. So we don't have any kind of deviations or problems moving forward. Next slide. For the Penta work, we have a timeline view that's linked in the agenda or in the doc here, but we are working through all the different components right now and making them in Figma, which has a good kind of transition tool for developers so they can kind of consume all the variables and tokens that we're using. So the timeline is kind of running up until about 2024, I think, with both core and development work. We are looking for any kind of products who are looking at doing some of these visual refreshes, like we've spoken to, like OpenShift AI, for example, trying to collect use cases on how we can kind of serve our designs and make sure that we're testing them as we go so that none of the component changes we're making are going to break any particular product's use case. Next, this is the projected asterisk timeline that we're working towards. We have an alpha release scheduled for early February, where we'll have the new look and feel. And we'll also be working on testing our extensions throughout the entire roadmap. So that way we have kind of checkpoints along the way. And user feedback will be one of those extensions, but we're also just inviting products to contribute and to share their thoughts on what we're doing. The beta release will be in May, which will have the classic theme that we mentioned. Any large breaking change work will be completed at this point so that we can move into the final round of testing and product adoption to work with those teams to make sure that everything is kind of buttoned up and ready for the final V6 release, which is in July. And again, all the stuff is mapped out in our timeline view. And lastly, we're just looking for opportunities to partner with product teams. We've had similar presentations to this where we're just trying to get a sense of where products are at in their development, if they're trying to get a demo out for Summit or any other kind of event. We're very interested to hear what that kind of schedule looks like and how we can work together on sharing this new visual refresh. I think it would demo very well at conferences and events. It would be certainly a nice win for both Red Hat and PatternFly products, but just wanted to put it out there. I wanted to share this presentation just to the broader audience so that we can try and make some of those conversations and get them started. If anyone watching this has any questions or is interested in just setting up a call and talking through this, we'd obviously be more than happy to do that. Just feel free to reach out to anyone on the PatternFly team. PatternFly or list PatternFly channel is a good one, or just the PatternFly Slack thread. I think I did it in time, Austin.
You did excellent. A round of applause to all of the presenters today. This was a lot of information to get through in the 50 minutes that we did. Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for the PatternFly V6 rundown. All right. Does anyone have any questions about any of the topics we've brought up today? All right, I don't see any hands coming up or mics coming off mute, so I'll take that as a no. thanks all for your time today. And for those that celebrate it, enjoy it, whatever the proper word is, happy Halloween.